Hi, today I'm going to teach you more about the topic of CBDCs or central bank digital currencies, but for time-saving purposes, I will just be referring to them as CBDCs. And I've decided to teach you more about this topic in particular because I think CBDCs are going to be, well, absolutely transformational within the next decade. Many countries, including the European Union, are considering to implement CBDCs, and if they are indeed implemented, everyone will be able to use them. So even if you're not really involved in finance or investments, it's still going to be very relevant to you. And in this video, I'm going to explain more about what CBDCs really are, why they exist, what the advantages and concerns to them are, and I'm going to show you some examples of how they have already performed in practice. So what are CBDC? So CBDC is an abbreviation. It stands for Central Bank Digital Currency, and they are a digital form of government-issued currency that isn't pegged or tied to a physical commodity. For example, like the US dollar is pegged to gold. They're, they are still issued by central banks whose role it is to execute monetary policy, to support a nation's government financial services, and to, of course, issue currency. The US Fed is probably the most famous example of a central bank where Jerome Powell is currently the chair, and in the Netherlands, the DNB is our central bank. And you might be asking yourself, what really has fueled the central bank's interest in CBDCs in the last few years? Because 5 years ago, no one was talking about them, and now it might become a reality in the next 4 to 5 years. And there are probably four main trends that have really encouraged the central banks to consider alternatives to cash. And the first one is a real decline in the use of cash. In Europe, between 2014 and 2021, cash use declined by a third, and in Norway, just 3% of all transactions are done with cash. The rest is all digital. So this really forces the central banks to reevaluate, reconsider, and re-examine their role in the monetary system. Second reason is just an ever-growing interest in privately owned and privately used digital assets. In the UK, about 10% of adults have or have held digital assets like crypto before. And in mainland Europe, it's about the same. In the six largest countries, about 10% of households uh, own digital currencies. Reason three, there's a decreasing sense in central banks as payment innovators. And by introducing CBDCs, central banks hope to put themselves in the spotlight again as innovators. And then the fourth and final reason is the rise in global payment systems. And by introducing CBDCs, central banks hope to establish better local governance over those systems. And again, I can hear you asking, what are the benefits to CBDCs, and are there any concerns or any disadvantages? And there are a few potential advantages. The first one is cost reduction. CBDCs could save up to $400 billion annually for financial service providers if they move away from the traditional cash business. Increased speed is another one. CBDCs could really improve the speed of many countries' electronic payment systems. Financial inclusion is another one. In 2016, about 1.6 billion people worldwide did not have a bank account, and CBDCs are accessible through mobile phones and mobile phone networks, and would therefore make banking a lot more accessible to a lot more people. And the last reason, or the last advantage, is better security. Your account would be encrypted, which makes it much more difficult to breach, and therefore reducing the chances of fraud. However, there are also some concerns around CBDCs. The first one is privacy. When money becomes digital, it becomes traceable and therefore taxable, which for a lot of people would be a hurdle to voluntarily adopt it. The lack of technological stability is another one. In early 2022, a Caribbean digital currency went offline for 2 months because of technological issues. Well, if that happens in the EU, it's a massive problem. So that really can't happen. And the last one is there's really not a strong business case for CBDCs, especially in Europe. It's extremely expensive. According to PwC, it's going to cost 18 billion euros to implement in Europe. And there's a real question of whether the marginal benefits are really going to outweigh the marginal costs. Um, The euro is already a very stable currency with good backing. Transactional speed in the EU is already good, so that money could probably be better spent elsewhere. But globally, 87 countries have already started to explore CBDCs, and they represent about 90% of global GDP. In June, for example, of 2022, Jamaica introduced GEMDAX, which was really the first legal tender CBDC. But it's quite a simple one. It's not blockchain based, and it doesn't really support any cross-border payments. In October of 2021, Nigeria introduced the e-Naira, but that project failed miserably. It was a big failure due to some security issues and a lot of government misconduct with it actually. So it didn't really benefit the people, but it just was used by the government to control its people even more. China is probably the most advanced country that have introduced CBDCs. In 2019, they started a pilot with a digital yuan in 4 cities, and the first signs were actually very positive. It enhanced financial inclusion, KYC for banks, know your customer, and it reduced compliance cost for banks, which was good. And during the Winter Olympics of 2022, was also used in the Olympic Village by foreign athletes. So it does also work for people outside of China. So getting back to wrapping it up, it's really a question of whether we're going to see a widely used CBDC in Europe in the near future. Yes, there are some benefits, but it's a real question of whether the benefits outweigh the costs. And yeah, that's for you to judge. So on that note, I would like to end. Thank you for watching and see you next week. Thank you.